Folks, I'm very excited to present our very first block from the block of the month, Arabella by Wing and a Prayer Designs. I'm going to be sewing each and every month with all of you in tutorial fashion. This is month one. I'm super excited. Are you ready? Let's get stitching. Well, welcome everybody to the first edition of Arabella. This is month one, block of the month. And look, I even have a different shirt on today. Folks, we are going to do this and we're going to do this together, and I'm super excited to know how many hundreds of you are following along. My goodness, what a blessing. And thank you for being here with us at Stitchin Heaven. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so. Yes, we normally have all kinds of wonderful quilting tutorials, and as well this year, I'm going to do one of the block of the months with all y'all. And I've chosen Arabella, which is a beautiful batik quilt featuring fabrics that are called Arabella from Timeless Treasures Fabrics by Wing and a Prayer Designs. And I was actually blessed to speak with Tony herself this morning on the phone. Tony and Jenny are the partners at Wing and a Prayer Design, and she gave me a bunch of awesome tips to share with all of you, especially in month one, and especially those of you who are cutting like I am and not using one of our pre-cut kits from Stitchin Heaven. So the first few minutes of the videos, if you have your pre-cut kits already, might just be redundant information, because as you can see, I have strips and squares of fabric and I need to do a little bit more trimming before we can get started. But before we can even dive into that, because it is the first month and I'm going to slow down and really work on a very beautiful but accurate quilt, let's talk about a little bit of that. Tony gave me a bunch of great tips to teach all of you throughout the pattern, so stick with me for those wonderful tricks. But I also want to point out we're using very high quality batiks, and batiks have a wonderful density to them. So not only are they gorgeous, but they don't stretch as much. They don't unravel as much. So these are going to really be a benefit to some high quality quilt making today. And we're going to have month after month of these great patterns. Now, the patterns are written in this really elaborate grayscale where they have a color code for each fabric number. We are using the actual fabrics that Tony and Jenny designed themselves, and we have a color key. We at Stitchin Heaven always have a link to a Facebook group and a color key online as well that you can check out. I've got samples of that here. You can find that. We're also working through our full color worksheet from the Arabella pattern starting on month one here, and it's the center block, and so you'll be able to see it here. And on this inside page is also another gorgeous color chart. So what I've done is I just quickly today, because it's my first time working through these fabrics, is I really want to make sure I'm very familiar. It'll be the same fabrics we use throughout the project, so I wanted to make sure I went ahead and I numbered with little pins that have numbers on them. So I'm just going to start familiarizing myself and all of the rest of us together today with the fabrics using their appropriate numbers of the fabric and everything as we go. So in your pattern, you also have a really cool first page. Don't overlook this, folks. This has some really cool tips and techniques on how you're building your half square triangles. You're going to be squaring them up, the flying geese, the square and the square, the V blocks, all kinds of different sets, that kind of stuff. But each month we will be working through just the pages as we go. And on each page, I want to point out again, you have the completed block in its grayscale with the textures of the fabrics. You have the individual units broken down. So there's a half square triangle. We'll make 4 of those today. There's the V blocks. We'll be making 4 of those today. And our center square and a square, we'll make 1 of those for the project. Right here is your color and your cutting chart. So fabric 1, I'm going to need to, it tells me here, I need a cut of a 4.5 by a 21 inch. So as you go through here, that's going to give you some information. And so as we're building today, let me give you your combinations, and we're going to start with the square and the square. We're going to make 1 of those, and that's going to feature our fabric 4 and fabric 8. Okay, then we're going to move into our V block, and our V block here is going to feature our fabrics 1 and 10, some real high contrast. So you can see I've already pinned those to mark them. We'll get to those in a few moments. And then fabrics 2 and 5 are going to be used for the half square triangles that kind of form out the cornerstone. So it's a very easy block today. We're going to kind of build up in intensity throughout the project. But as I said, I've got the original set, not the pre-cut set from Stitchin Heaven. And so now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to find fabric 4, and I'm going to cut myself 1, 3, and 3/8 inch square. And speaking with Tony, these fabric requirements and patterns are very accurate. So better to not necessarily round up. There's not a lot of 1/8 inch cuts, but the ones that are in there are going to be necessary. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to first make myself a 3 3/8 inch strip. So I'm just finding that across the entire edge. So that's 3 1/2. So it's going to be the line before that, between 1/4 and 1/2 is the 3/8. Okay, so first thing I'm just doing is making a 3 3/8 strip. Now I'm going to come in and I'm literally going to use that straight line, because part of our fabric key, or our key to accuracy, is really accurate cuts. So now I've cut 3 sides basically. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to rotate this, and I'm looking back for that 3 3/8. And what I'm really doing, folks, is I'm looking at the little dashes as they go through, making sure that my fabric is legible all the way through. I know it's pretty hard to see in the camera overhead like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and slice that off as well. And now I have a 3 3/8 inch square. Okay, and then from my fabric 8 here, I come over and it says I need to make 2 that are 3 1/4 inch square, and then I'm going to cut those in half diagonally. So I'll end up with 4 of those squares, which makes sense. I need one for each of the edges here. So 3 1/4, let's do the same thing. Let's go ahead now and make a 3 1/4 inch strip, and there's my 3 inches, and I'm going to come over 1/4. Real nice and legible, making sure I'm not under or over cutting that strip. Okay, now I'm going to cut 3 1/4 inch, rotate, and find that same mark for 3 1/4 here. That's one of them. And then I'm going to come over here and make sure I'm looking up. I've got 3 1/4, and that's my second one. Now, you can do this if you really pay attention. Make sure you line up your corners by stacking them up. And I'm also going to put my pin right back on top of my colors, as you can see. Rotate this here. Make sure that you're real accurate, folks, because all of this is going to count in the end on this project. And I'm now going to lay my ruler from corner to corner, come in here, and we're going to go ahead and cut through just like that. Okay, so that's how the cutting instructions are going to read for your square and a square. And let's just do all of our cutting before we get started with our sewing today. Now the V blocks, this one can be a bit of a challenge, and it's not a challenge, it's just sometimes a misunderstanding between raw and cut sizes. So now here, I'm looking for what are going to be fabrics 1 and 10, fabric 10 over here, fabric 1 over here. It says I need a 4 1/2 inch by 21 inch strip. So let's check these heights real quick and make sure that we're dealing with 4 1/2. And I really need to cut these one at a time, because some are going to be the tall parts and some are going to be the other parts of our triangle. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to measure. And I can see that I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. And I needed 4 1/2 inches. So I need to trim these down, and I want to use a bigger than ruler. So let's go through now and process the rest of our cuts and catch back up once we have all of our pieces made, and I'll show you how to cut those V blocks first. But I'm going to whittle down all my fabrics real quick to speed things up here, and we'll just cut the pieces we need. Okay, so I've got everything else cut and prepped, but I really wanted to make sure that we went nice and slow for everybody, because many of you have not made these tall triangle blocks before. We've got another great video with Tiffany Hayes talking about her goddess tool out there. Today we're going to use the Creative Grids 2 Peaks in 1. The pattern's written for this, and there has been some confusion every now and again with how to use this. So we're using a 4 1/2 inch tall strip. So you can see in the oval it says 4 1/2, and that will make a 4 inch finished tall triangle block. So for our particular block right now, we are going to make the centers the tall, lighter fabric, and then the darkers are our outer sides. So we're going to cut both sides here just with a little overlap. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim off this here. Being careful of that other batik, probably should just move that out of the way a little bit. Now we're going to make our other, technically our first or our second cut, and I'm really making sure I keep that nice square tip at the top. So I can do 1. We're going to need 4 of these. You can rotate the tool, making sure you line up the black line with the oval down there at the base like you see, and then cut your second, rotate, using all your alignment marks, and so on and so forth. So we'll need 4 of those. And it will be the same for our dark parts, but we're going to use the other half of the trimmer, which is really cool. And now on this side, we can use that straight edge, still looking because we have a 4.5-inch strip, right? 4.5 inches tall. So now I'm going to line up the straight edge here, top edge, and so I can trim a cut. And don't forget to take off that little notch. That's really important there. That's going to help us line things up. Okay, and we can now flip the tool because we're using a, just rotate the tool. Find that same bottom mark. Straight cut first, and then take off the corner. Okay, and so you're going to need 8 of those to match up with the 4 of the tall triangles. Okay, and now we have our 8th one of those cut, real nice and easy. So I'm going to set all of my additional fabrics aside to come back to them later. And now let's go ahead and start following the pattern up here with our square in the square. And as a reminder, on your general instructions, the very first page, there's a really cool square in the square info. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our square first, and we're going to get some alignment marks. We're just going to fold it in half, both directions, and I'm just going to kind of press it. You could finger press it. You could tap it with your iron. And what this is going to do is it's going to help us find center. If you've never put triangles onto a square before, the triangles run a little long. Okay, so these triangles, right, they're longer than those side edges. So when we go ahead and you take this and you lay your straight edge first, and then you align your triangle right into that tip, into that fold, we now know it's centered. And we're going to go ahead and sew on one of these. And folks, I'm also going to point out, because of my conversation with Tony and Jenny, that I want to be basically doing a scant 1/4 inch. The pattern's written for real accurate 1/4 inch. So today I'm going to use the edge of my foot because I have a little heavier threads. You know, I like my Aurifil 40 weights. That's a little heavier. So I'm just going to use the edge of my foot through my project because all of our blocks we're going to be able to trim down. Okay, so I'm going to do that one, and then I'm going to flip to the opposite side first. Okay, and so now I'm going to go ahead and again align that up, line my straight edges, and I'm going to sew this down. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to the iron station and we're going to press. And I'm kind of pressing away from center on both sides here. This is going to help us with our bulk. Pressing away from center. And now we're going to go ahead and add on our last piece where we're going to actually see, I just want you to see now, you're going to be sewing over those edges still. There's that center mark in there. I can still barely see it. I know that batik is really fun, but it is a little busy, so it might be harder for you to see. 1/4 inch seam allowance right along this edge. And because we're not sewing over another seam, we can do just like we did at the beginning, the first there, marking that up real nice. I'm going to adjust that so that's in that center mark still. Perfect. Ooh, I don't know if you can hear the rain in my microphone or not, but it is really raining outside and it's a perfect day for quilt making inside. I hope you're enjoying a beautiful day making a quilt with me as well. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and press again away from center. And when you look back into the instructions, it's going to tell you you can square this block down to 4.5 inches square. So now what we want to do, and I think I want my Martelli mat for the rest of this. This just makes life so much easier. So now I'm going to come in here and first let's just check our size. Oh, I'm at a 5 and I need to be at 4.5. So that's great. So now what I can do is I can find 4.5. So that's going to be 2.25. Right? So I'm going to make my 2.25 and my 2.25. You see how I'm lining it up right on those center points like that? So that's going to really give me exactly what I need. I just want to make sure I'm not going so fast that I'm getting this wrong. So 4.5 divided in half is 2.25. That's right where I'm at. So now I can come in here and I can trim, although I'm a little nervous, I'm going to cut off that seam allowance if I do that. So I've got my 2 and my 2.25, my 2.25 mark, and I'm going to trim down. And then I'm going to rotate and I'm going to do the other side, making sure. So now I can come over here to 4.5 to make sure I'm staying at my 4.5. And I also want to make sure that I'm trimming the block real nice and square. So I'm looking at that perpendicular line going through there as well. I'm now at 4.5. Great. Now I can rotate this here and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm finding my 2 inches, 2.25. Now I can have a nice center line at the bottom or the top to square to, double checking. Sometimes it's hard to teach, cut, and pay attention to everything going on at the same time. Okay, and because this was the first sewing I did on this, you can see that I've come a little bit less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when I was on there, now I know I need to cheat a little bit and go a little bit long because I gave myself too much fabric, more trimming than was necessary, if that makes sense. And this is the best part of sewing together on these tutorial videos, block of the month styles. We're going to learn so much as we go. So we have a real nice accurate square and a square to start with. This is the center of the quilt. We really want it to be beautiful. Even though these are a little shy, we're going to stitch those and make those work for us into the future. Okay, now let's go ahead and do our V blocks. And the V blocks are going to be real simple. We're going to go ahead and stitch those together, and we have 4 of them to make. So again, because we're using Batiks, we don't really have right sides, but you want to make sure that you're building back in a rectangle, right? So just make sure you're not getting these things oblong, if that makes any sense. So we've kind of got our small pointy tip down here, our long skinny tip here. Match those up, and that's what that bottom corner trim out was for. It's real nice. And then that lines up there for our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now these blocks will be sewing to 4.5 inches square. So these ones aren't going to be trimmed down. So this is something that you want to put on one side and you want to press away from center. Okay, and now we're going to put on our other side and we're going to do some calculations real quick to make sure everything's going cool. Okay, just as a reminder, lining up. It is better for you to have cut your strip sets a little bit long if you're not dealing with one of our pre-cut kits than it is to cut it a little short. Tony kept talking about adding a thread or two, and that really is the thickness of our top needle thread and our bobbin thread when it comes down to it. So I've added about a thread or two now to the outside of that presser foot. See, it's just a little bit more than it was before. Let's go ahead and just press this over real quick and see how we came out. We are looking again for a 4.5 inch square. So from side to side, almost 4.5 inches. I can do a little shave trim, top to bottom. Oh, perfect. Okay, so then in the same situation, I would want to come over here. I'm going to use this bottom to keep everything nice and square. Make sure that that center point again is at 2 1/4. So I can do a little shave. Oops, little shave here. Rotate. Now I come over here, perfect 4.5, 4.5. And we'll shave. See, just that little shave necessary there. And if you want to do your top and bottom, you can. 4.5 there. And it'll probably just be where the triangles crossed over themselves. Okay, so you'll need to go ahead and make 8 of those, and we'll be back in a second with all of those made so we can build the block, no problem. But before we get into that construction, let's just finish off with our last style of block to make, or last unit today, and that's going to be these half square triangles. So I've taken from my fabrics 2 and 5, and we've cut 5 1/4 inch squares. See how it says 5 1/4 each of those there? Okay, and there's no other additional cuts, but you have drawn a diagonal line with a chalk pencil from edge to edge. Now that is going to become a guiding line for our sewing. So we're going to go ahead and come on over here and put that presser foot. These will be trimmed back down to a size. So we can be a little shy on our sewing here, or make our block a little bit big. And we can also do multiples at once by grabbing the next one and just sewing down just like we did on the first one. And if you're not familiar, this term is called chain piecing, and you may hear me mentioning this again throughout this video series. Now we do need to sew on both sides of those lines, so I'm going to use my thread cutter on the machine, and before I do anything else, I'm just going to rotate the block so I'm on the other side of that chalk line, and I'm going to do the exact same seam allowance to the first set of squares. And I should have pointed out I had my dark fabric 5, I believe was the number underneath the, see the other one there? So now we're going to go ahead and rotate here, perfect. We're going to go ahead and stitch through there as well. And you're probably familiar with half square triangles, but I'd like to show you how we do them here. There are many different ways to do these, but safety first, we're going to take our cutter and our trimmer, or our tool I should say, our ruler, and we're going to cut on that chalk line now. Okay, that's the easiest way. And then we're going to go on to our ironing board. So let's go ahead and get this one cut as well. And I'm going to go ahead and hold the dark fabric into the air, and I'm going to now press from the light fabric into the dark fabric on all 4 of these units. This wool mat makes it pretty nice because I can kind of assembly line them, and I'll show you how to trim that one there. Again, dark fabric in the air. Go ahead and roll that over like that. Okay. So now that we have this, we're going to just check our instructions here and there also, as it would make sense to some of us who have made many quilts in our lives, also looking for 4 1/2 inch squares at this point. Now the key to this kind of a trimming is you find the diagonal 45 line on your ruler, and then because we're looking for 4 1/2 inch squares, right, we have a lot we can trim off. So the first side with the diagonal running right down that seam you've already created, this is what's going to force the perfect diagonal square. I'm going to trim, and I actually like to come kind of from the back of the ruler off. That way I just, nice and easy. Did I get that? Yes, I did. Okay, now we're going to rotate, and we're going to go ahead and rotate the ruler, and now I find my perfect 4 1/2 and 4 1/2 in my corner. 4 1/2, 4 1/2 in the corner, and at this point I should still have my diagonal line lined up in my seam. This is square, square. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim once and trim twice, and that gives us there what is considered a perfect 4 1/2 inch half square triangle. So remember, to build all of these units back together, we are going to need our units all at 4 1/2 inches so that they work. So I'm going to go ahead and finish building out my tall triangles, trim everything down here, and meet you back here in just a second for the final assembly of today's quilt block. Okay folks, now that you have all of your units trimmed up, it's time to build basically what we would refer to as a 9 patch. And again, at the top of page 1 of your instructions, the first center block here, we're just going to build the units, and we're just going to focus on our center square and a square. And then basically what I like to do is focusing on my darker fabrics on those tall triangles. Those are going to touch down here. And you can see we're going to have a point where we can use for accuracy on our 1/4 inch. Okay, and then our lighter units of the half square triangles, or the lighter fabrics of the half square triangles, are going to come in here to add additional contrast. You see that there? Additional contrast with the light fabrics against those dark fabrics. So this is what we need to now build. We're going to go ahead and match these up very simply with that nice 1/4 inch. Now this is where we're not going to have any more opportunity to trim down. So we want to make sure our 1/4 inch is very accurate, because this block sets the tone for the whole rest of the project. So I'm going to cheat out just a little further where I can see the line on my foot now. And the line on my stitch plate is what I was trying to say. I'm just going to maintain. And for improved accuracy, which is what the passion for precision is about, is I am going to take a moment and press after each. And I'm going to press this bottom row. Let's see, I'm going to be pressing those away from center. So now on this one, we're going to press into the center fabric. So hold that center tall triangle up and press over. You could also be pressing your seams open, but I don't know that I'm going to go that far in this project. Okay, so far things are looking terrific. We're going to go ahead and put on this unit here. A little slower pace helps just keep a real nice clean seam allowance there. And again, we're going to press back into that center square. Just like that. Okay, so now I've got that top row done. And I figured we'd save the middle, which is going to be basically a little more challenging. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and match up those points, right? And what we really want to do is we want to go ahead and drop that needle right through that cross there on our tall triangle for a perfect corner union. Right there. That's what you're shooting for. And now this one I'm going to press away from center. And even with that little bit shorter seam allowance, you can see pretty dang accurate. I hit it maybe a little bit deep, so I want to go ahead and cheat this time out a little further so that I get that needle right where those threads cross, right there. Okay, and we're pressing away from center again here. Now we're just going to go ahead and stitch on one of these sides, and now because of the way that I press towards and away from center here, those seams should be nestling. So I can go ahead and just kind of finger wiggle, press those together, start with my corner out here. So we're going to have multiple alignment marks now. So I'm going to start with the corner, and I'm only worrying about that first set of blocks. Making sure that the seam allowances are snuggled together there. Coming through here. Now we're going to need to start watching for this corner point, right? And I want to make sure that it's lined up with that corner point. And I might need to do a little adjusting because of that first cut I made. So now my finger's on it. I'm just holding. I believe I got it real nice. And now I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to adjust to make sure that those are nestled. Nested, and then coming into the very bottom corner, I've got that lined up. And that's about as accurate as this guy's going to get over here. Let's go ahead and press this away from center as well. And we'll put on our last side. We'll pat ourselves on the back, and we'll call it a very successful first month of our Arabella Block of the Month quilt along here. This has been so much fun. And again, Tony and Jenny, thank you so much for a great pattern. Wing and Prayer Designs been doing this for a long time, very, very well. But it was really neat today to get some tips from the experts themselves as we are starting the video out. Super fun, what a blessing. Okay, just nesting up those, watching my center union points again. Really want some nice accurate corners. And you'll notice just with my needle down at a nice slow pace, we're able to get it done real nice and efficiently today. Last little thread cut, and we've got it done, folks. This is exciting. All right, there it is, looking wonderful. As you can see, most of my points are pretty dang accurate, as close as I'm going to usually get them. I've got points left out here with my 1/4 inch seam allowances to start to catch and pick up as we go on to month number 2. My goal for all of us is to have this be the 3rd Wednesday video of each month. I did this one a little early because I was excited and it's month 1, and I've got something very exciting for all of you next week. Make sure that you're sewing along and also participating with us on our Facebook private group for the Arabella Block of the Month. I'll make sure there's a link in the video description below so that you can all log in over there and make sure you're sharing all of your photos and your fun stories and tips and tricks and techniques and things, as well as I'm doing here, so that we can all enjoy being part of that fabulous quilting community here at Stitchin Heaven and participating in our Arabella Block of the Month. Thanks, folks. We'll see all of you Block of the Month quilters in a month from now. We'll see the rest of you next Wednesday. Thanks again, and please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.